The Zelthar Dominion's war fleet materialized from hyperspace like a looming storm. 2,000 warships, a force designed to break entire civilizations, spread across the cold vacuum of the Nix-47 system. The void rumbled as the fleet moved into formation, weapons primed, shields pulsing like the heartbeat of a predator sensing its kill. From the bridge of the Zelthar flagship, Wrath of Xyratal, Supreme Admiral Xyratal watched the sensor feeds with unreadable eyes. A battle-hardened warrior, he had crushed rebellions, raised colonies, and faced fleets 10 times his own. Victory was never a question, it was a certainty. "Have the humans responded?" he asked. His second-in-command, Commander Verkol, snapped to attention. "A response, yes. But an anomaly, Supreme One." Xyratal turned, his segmented brow narrowing. "Anomaly?" The commander hesitated. "They sent one ship." Silence spread through the command deck. Officers glanced at one another, antennae twitching in disbelief. Xyratal's mandibles tightened. "One," he echoed. Verkol nodded, eyes flicking to the tactical display. A solitary blue blip hovered at the system's edge. Compared to the vast sea of red denoting the Zelthar fleet, it was a speck of dust before a tidal wave. "Magnify," Xyratal ordered. The holoscreen flickered. The UNS Perseus came into focus, a sleek, obsidian-hulled warship, its angular design a stark contrast to the massive, beetle-like structures of the Zelthar. It looked small, almost insignificant, a mistake waiting to be erased. Xyratal let out a slow, amused breath. "What insult is this?" A transmission request flashed across the screen. The human captain was calling. Xyratal folded his arms. "Open the channel." The holoscreen shifted, revealing Captain Elias Vance. His icy blue eyes were sharp, calculating, his expression unreadable. A scar ran along his jaw, a relic of old battles. The uniform he wore was crisp, but the way he stood, relaxed, almost casual, sent a ripple of irritation through the Zelthar officers. "Supreme Admiral Xyratal," Vance greeted, voice calm. "You brought quite the welcoming party." Xyratal tilted his head, studying him. "You are either a fool, or your leaders hold their warriors in deep contempt." Vance smirked. "Or maybe we just like playing fair." Murmurs spread through the Zelthar ranks. Xyratal's claws clicked against his armrest. "You think one ship stands a chance against my armada?" "You assume I need a fleet," Vance said. "But here's the thing, you have 2,000 ships. That means 2,000 weaknesses." He leaned forward, eyes glinting. "I only need to find one." A flicker of something unpleasant passed through Xyratal's gaze. But then, he let out a deep, rumbling chuckle. "Amusing," he admitted. "But foolish." He turned to his officers. "Destroy him." The comm cut. At once, the fleet surged forward. Missile silos opened, plasma cannons hummed, the wrath of Xyratal itself locking onto the tiny human vessel. Vance exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "Here we go." Shields at full, his tactical officer, Lieutenant Kira Solis, confirmed. "We've got 6 destroyers moving in fast." Vance gave a nod. "Bring us about. Let's give them a reason to reconsider." The Perseus roared to life, its thrusters flaring as it twisted into a sharp arc. The first barrage of plasma bolts streaked past, barely missing. Vance felt the vibration as the Perseus point defense lasers tore through incoming missiles, reducing them to bursts of harmless light. Then they struck back. "Fire on my mark," Vance commanded. A split-second pause, then the Perseus unleashed a concentrated railgun blast. The first Zelthar destroyer took a direct hit to its bridge. The kinetic impact shattered its shields, sending a rippling explosion across its hull. In seconds, it was reduced to a drifting husk. The bridge erupted in cheers. Vance, however, remained stone-faced. "Don't celebrate yet." The enemy adjusted quickly, their formations tightening. 2 frigates broke off, attempting to flank. "Solis," Vance prompted. Kira's hands flew over the controls. "Deploying decoys." Engaging ECM. A swarm of false signals erupted around the Perseus, confusing the enemy's targeting systems. The flanking frigates hesitated, and that hesitation cost them. EMP burst, Vance ordered. A silent wave of electromagnetic energy pulsed from the Perseus. The Zelthar frigate systems flickered, shields failing for a crucial moment. Vance didn't waste it. Fire! The Perseus' main guns pierced through both ships before they had a chance to recover. The frigates erupted into silent, fiery blooms. Another Zelthar cruiser rushed in, desperate to avenge its fallen brethren. But it was too slow. Vance had already anticipated it. Rotate, bring torpedoes to bear. The Perseus twisted sharply, its side-mounted torpedo bays locking on. Launch. 2 torpedoes streaked toward the cruiser. The first punched through the hull. The second detonated deep inside, tearing the ship apart in a brilliant cascade of fire and debris. On board the Wrath of Xyratal, silence reigned. Xyratal watched as 4 of his warships drifted lifelessly, destroyed by a single opponent. His claws tightened. "Impressive," he muttered. "But now, let's see how long he lasts." He turned to his fleet. "All ships, crush him." The entire armada surged forward. On the Perseus, alarms blared. Kira whistled under her breath. "Well, Captain, I think we made them mad." Vance cracked his neck, lips curling in a half-smile. "Good," he said. "Now we can really get started." The Perseus was outnumbered 2,000 to 1. But for Elias Vance, numbers had never mattered. Strategy did. The Zelthar war fleet surged forward, a wave of monstrous warships closing in from all sides. Plasma batteries hummed, missile bays hissed open, and ion cannons locked onto the lone human vessel. From the bridge of the Wrath of Xyratal, Supreme Admiral Xyratal watched, arms crossed, mandibles clicking in satisfaction. "This ends now," he declared. "Vaporize that ship." At his command, the first barrage was unleashed. Hundreds of plasma lances and hyper-accelerated projectiles streaked through the void, converging on their lone target. The Perseus vanished. Xyratal's eyes widened. What? The barrage struck only empty space. On board the Perseus, Lieutenant Kira Solis smirked. "Cloaking field engaged. We're ghosts now." Vance exhaled. The Perseus experimental stealth drive was their ace in the hole. It wasn't true invisibility, but to enemy sensors, they simply didn't exist. "Now we make them bleed," Vance said. The Zelthar fleet adjusted, scanning frantically for their missing prey. Smaller ships broke formation, weaving through the battlefield, searching for any sign of movement. Inside the Wrath, Verkol's fingers danced across the control panel. "Deploying deep scans. Nothing yet, Supreme One." Xyratal snarled. "Impossible. No ship can simply disappear." Then, the first explosion rocked the fleet. A Zelthar frigate's reactor overloaded in a blinding burst, breaking in half. Another ship followed, then a third. Silent destruction. No warning. No enemy. Panic rippled through the fleet. "They're inside our formation," a Zelthar captain shouted over comms. "We can't see them." From the Perseus, Vance watched the chaos unfold. "Beautiful," he muttered. "Fire at will, hit and run." His weapons officer, Ensign Reese Carter, nodded sharply. "Locking on. Firing railguns." A Zelthar battlecruiser shuddered violently, its engines erupting into flames as a single well-placed shot pierced its core. The shockwave rippled outward, damaging nearby ships. The Perseus drifted away, already gone before anyone could react. Another volley. Another ship lost. A fleet of thousands, reduced to paranoia and wreckage. The War of Shadows. Xyratal slammed his fist against the armrest. "Enough. Fire blind. Blanket the entire area." A desperate maneuver. Every ship in the fleet unleashed their weapons into the void, flooding space with plasma, rail slugs, and missiles. A storm of destruction. Solis cursed. "They're firing at everything." The Perseus veered hard, dodging the oncoming barrage. The shields flared as a glancing plasma shot scraped across the hull. "Shields at 60%, Carter reported. Vance gritted his teeth. They couldn't stay cloaked forever. A Zelthar war frigate swept dangerously close, its sensors flickering erratically, catching hints of something not quite right. Then, its captain saw it, a faint distortion in the void. There. Before the warning could reach the fleet, Vance struck first. Torpedoes. Now. 2 projectiles detonated against the frigate's hull, sending it into a spiral of flame and debris. The enemy's last message died in static. Solis let out a breath. That was close. Vance's expression didn't change. They'll figure it out soon. We need to disappear again. He glanced at the tactical map. The Perseus had cut through the enemy ranks, leaving a corridor of devastation behind. They were now dangerously close to the wrath of Zyratal itself. A new opportunity presented itself. Vance's lips curled. Let's make things personal. Hunting the Admiral. The wrath of Zyratal was a fortress, thickly armored, shielded by an escort of heavy warships. The heart of the Zelthar fleet. And Vance was heading straight for it. "Captain," Solis said warily. "That's their command ship. If they hit us with one good shot, we're gone." "Then we don't let them." Vance's eyes glinted. "Prepare a data spike. We're getting inside their systems." As the Perseus glided unseen through the void, Carter hacked into Zelthar communications, feeding false signals through their channels. Moments later, dozens of Zelthar ships received an urgent alert, falsified by the Perseus. Unknown enemy fleet detected on the far side of the system. Zyratal's officers reacted instantly. Supreme 1. New contacts detected. Potential reinforcements. Zyratal hissed. "What? Impossible." He turned to his fleet. "Deploy scouts. Find them. Now." Warships peeled away, drawn toward the false threat. Defenses weakened. Formation compromised. Vance smirked. "They just opened the door." He turned to Carter. "Hit their comms." A pulse rippled through the Wrath's network. The Zelthar flagship's communications scrambled, cutting off their ability to coordinate the fleet. Confusion spread through their ranks. Then, for the first time, Vance spoke directly to Zyratal again. His voice echoed across the Admiral's bridge. "You're losing control, Supreme Admiral." Zyratal's mandibles snapped shut. You thought you were the hunter. But you're bleeding, and your fleet knows it." Zyratal's claws dug into the armrest. "I will kill you for this." Vance chuckled, cold and sharp. "You can try." Then the transmission cut out, and the Perseus fired its first direct shot at the wrath of Zyratal. A railgun round slammed into the flagship's hull, piercing its outer defenses. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to send a message. "You are not untouchable." The Perseus disappeared again. Retreat or ruin. Chaos consumed the Zelthar fleet. Ships clashed, orders overlapped, panic spread. Zyratal's officers were visibly shaken. "Supreme One, we must regroup." Zyratal seethed. A single ship had done this. A single human had humiliated him. He had underestimated them. "Never again. Send every remaining warship after them," Zyratal growled. "I want them destroyed." But his officers hesitated. Some ships were already breaking away, retreating. The tide was turning. And Vance knew it. Aboard the Perseus, Solis grinned. "We've got them rattled." Vance leaned back in his chair, watching the enemy ships scramble. "We're not done yet." His eyes gleamed. "Time for the killing blow." The Perseus was deep in enemy territory, but Elias Vance had no intention of turning back. The Zelthar fleet was fractured, and the Supreme Admiral's command ship, the Wrath of Zyratal, was vulnerable. If he struck now, he could end the battle before it truly began. His crew knew it too. "Captain," Lieutenant Kira Solis said from the tactical console, "the Wrath shields are still at full power, but their comms remain compromised. They can't coordinate efficiently." Ensign Reese Carter turned in his chair. "They're still sending ships after us. If we stay too long, we'll get boxed in." Vance drummed his fingers against his armrest, calculating. His ship was fast, elusive, but not invincible. One mistake, and the Perseus would be nothing more than debris. "Then we make this count," he decided. "Target their shield generators. We crack those, and the Wrath is just another big, slow target." Solis nodded, lining up the shot. The Perseus twisted through the void, slipping between shifting Zelthar formations. Massive warships drifted past like blind beasts, their sensor feeds scrambled by the chaos Vance had sown. Ahead, the Wrath of Xyratal loomed, its armored hull glowing with the energy of its shields. It was the crown jewel of the Zelthar fleet, but Vance only saw a weak spot waiting to be exploited. "Firing railguns," Carter announced. The Perseus forward cannons thundered, unleashing a devastating kinetic round. The shot ripped through space, slamming into the Wrath's shield emitter array. The impact sent ripples of energy cascading across the shield barrier, not a breach, but a fracture. A vulnerability. Solis scanned the damage. "They're diverting power to compensate." "Hit them again," Vance ordered. Another railgun shot. Another direct impact. The shield pulsed, then flickered. Inside the Wrath, Supreme Admiral Xyratal gripped the armrest of his command chair, mandibles clenched tight. "Intensify shield output. Do not let them break through." His officers scrambled, rerouting energy, bolstering defenses. But it wasn't enough. Vance wasn't giving them time to recover. "Torpedoes," he said. "Full spread." 2 high-yield warheads launched from the Perseus, streaking toward the Wrath. The first impacted the weakened shield, and shattered it. The second slammed directly into the hull, sending a fireball of wreckage spiraling into space. For the first time, the Wrath of Xyratal was wounded. Desperation and retaliation. On board the Wrath, alarms screamed. The once invincible flagship now bled fire and atmosphere into the void. Xyratal rose from his chair, rage curling through every fiber of his being. His ship, his symbol of power, had been damaged by a single human. "This is unacceptable," he snarled. "Bring that ship down." Every nearby warship pivoted, locking on to the Perseus. Destroyers, battlecruisers, frigates, all turned their firepower onto one enemy. Vance saw the readings spike across his console. Too much incoming fire. He couldn't dodge it all. "Solis," he called. She was already working, running emergency maneuvers. "Hold on." The Perseus spiraled, thrusters burning hot. The first wave of plasma bolts missed by a hair, but then... impact. The ship shuddered violently as a direct hit tore through the port side. The bridge dimmed as energy levels fluctuated. Sparks flew from the consoles. "Shields at 20%. Carter shouted. "Hull breach on deck 4. We lost the lateral railgun." Vance's grip on the armrest tightened. "Damage control teams, now." More blasts rained down. The Perseus zigzagged through the chaos, dodging where it could, absorbing what it couldn't. Then came the second hit. A missile struck the stern, sending the ship into a violent spin. Vance felt the gravity stabilizers struggle, his body lurching as the Perseus fought to correct itself. "Engines losing power," Solis warned. Vance forced himself to breathe. They were in the worst possible position, caught in the open, bleeding energy, shields failing. They wouldn't last much longer. And yet, he wasn't done. His mind worked at lightning speed, analyzing the battlefield, enemy positions, escape vectors. A single move could decide if they lived or died. His decision came in an instant. "Take us under them," he ordered. Solis blinked. "What? Under the Wrath? They won't risk hitting their own flagship." For a second, she hesitated. Then she grinned. "You're insane." Vance smirked. "So I've been told." Dancing with the devil. The Perseus dove hard, dropping below the Wrath's massive hull. Enemy fire ceased instantly. Zelthar gunners hesitated, unwilling to risk striking their own admiral's vessel. "Perfect," Vance muttered. "Carter, I need a full power reroute. Dump everything into thrusters." Carter's fingers flew over the controls. "That'll burn out the drive." "We don't need it for long." Solis' eyes widened as she realized his plan. "We're slingshotting out of here." Vance nodded. "On my mark." The Perseus rocketed forward, skimming the Wrath's underbelly at blinding speed. Zelthar ships scrambled to reposition, but they were too slow. The Perseus burst past the Wrath, breaking free from the enemy formation. "They're adjusting," Solis said, watching the tactical feed. "We'll have maybe 30 seconds before they're back on us." Vance exhaled. "Then let's make them regret letting us go." He turned to Carter. "One final shot. Target their engines." The weapons officer grinned. "With pleasure." The railgun thundered one last time. The shot pierced the Wrath's rear thrusters, sending a cascade of explosions ripping through its propulsion systems. The Zelthar flagship lurched, its engines failing. For the first time in his career, Supreme Admiral Zyratal felt helpless. As the Perseus disappeared into the void, he stared at the damage reports in silence. His indestructible warship had been crippled. His fleet was in shambles. And worst of all, the human was still alive. The aftermath. On the Perseus, the bridge crew let out a collective breath. Solis grinned. "I can't believe that worked." Carter leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated. "They'll be feeling that one for a while." Vance simply watched the damaged enemy fleet shrink behind them, his expression unreadable. This wasn't over. He knew that. But he had won today. And when the Zelthar came again, they would remember this moment. One human ship. One impossible victory. And the beginning of something far greater. The Perseus was barely holding together. The ship's hull bore deep scars, its shields were exhausted, and the engines flickered between life and failure. But despite the damage, they had survived. On the bridge, Elias Vance surveyed the aftermath. The Wrath of Zyratal, once the pride of the Zelthar fleet, was crippled, drifting, its engines reduced to molten slag. The surrounding enemy warships were hesitant, their unity shattered. For the first time, the Zelthar had been outmaneuvered by a single human ship. Solis exhaled. "They're not pursuing." "Not yet," Vance corrected, eyes sharp. "They're too busy licking their wounds, but they'll recover. We need to be long gone before that happens." Carter swiveled in his seat. "Engines are in bad shape. We might have one, maybe 2 jumps left before they burn out for good." Vance frowned. 2 jumps wouldn't get them far enough. They were still deep in enemy territory, and if the Zelthar regrouped, the next engagement wouldn't end in their favor. He had to make a choice. Run and risk pursuit? Or press the advantage? He turned to Solis. "Can we still send a transmission?" She checked the comms panel. "The jamming field is breaking up, but it's weak. We might get a short burst out before it cuts off again." Vance nodded. It was enough. "Patch me through to the Zelthar fleet," he ordered. Solis hesitated, then complied. "Channel open. Let's hope they're listening." Vance leaned forward. His voice was calm, but unyielding. "This is Captain Elias Vance of the Perseus. I could have destroyed the Wrath of Zyratal. Instead, I gave you a choice. Withdraw now, or the next shot won't be a warning." There was a long silence. Then, the view screen flickered to life. The face of the enemy. Supreme Admiral Zyratal appeared, his imposing form shadowed by the dim, flickering lights of his damaged command bridge. His mandibles twitched, his compound eyes filled with barely restrained fury. "You are arrogant human," he hissed. "One ship, no matter how clever, will not stop the Zelthar Empire." Vance didn't blink. One ship just did. Zyratal's claws tightened on his command throne. Never had the Zelthar suffered humiliation like this. Their military doctrine was built on absolute superiority, overwhelming force crushing all resistance. But Vance had shattered that belief. You think this changes anything? Zyratal growled. We are endless. We will return, stronger than before. Vance tilted his head slightly. Maybe. But next time, you'll hesitate. Next time, you'll wonder if another human ship is waiting in the shadows. That doubt. That's the first crack in your empire. Zyratal's mandibles flared in frustration, but he said nothing. The moment stretched. Then, the first of the Zelthar warships disengaged, peeling away from the battle zone. One by one, others followed. The Supreme Admiral watched them retreat, his hands trembling with restrained rage. This is not over, he spat. Vance gave him a slight smirk. I know. The screen went dark. The wrath of Zyratal remained adrift, a monument to the battle. But the war had just begun. A hard-won escape. Solis let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Did that just happen? Did we actually make them back off? Carter chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. We just bluffed the Supreme Commander of the Zelthar Navy. That's one for the history books. Vance wasn't celebrating yet. We're not out of the fire. Set coordinates for the nearest safe zone. Carter worked quickly. We've got barely enough juice for one long jump. There's a neutral trade station in the Veridan Belt. It's not friendly territory, but it's not hostile either. That'll do, Vance said. Punch it. The Perseus groaned as its warp drive spun up, the battered ship straining against its own damage. Then, with a final burst of power, it disappeared into the void. Aftermath in the void. Hours later, in the quiet of the captain's quarters, Vance finally allowed himself a moment to process. They had survived. More than that, they had changed the battlefield. But it had come at a cost. The Perseus was barely holding together, the crew exhausted, supplies dwindling. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. A chime at his door pulled him from his thoughts. Come in, he called. Solis stepped inside, carrying a datapad. You should see this. She placed it on his desk, and Vance's brow furrowed as he read the report. Scans from their last battle showed something disturbing. The Zelthar fleet was larger than intelligence had predicted. Far larger. The wrath of Zyratal wasn't their only super dreadnought. There were more. Dozens more. Vance exhaled slowly. They weren't sending an invasion force. Solis nodded grimly. They were just the vanguard. For a moment, the weight of it all pressed down on him. The battle they had just fought, the desperate Gambit, the impossible victory, was just the beginning. He closed his eyes, letting the reality sink in. They had sent one ship against an empire. And they had won. But the empire was coming. Vance straightened. Then we do it again. Solis raised a brow. What? We keep fighting, he said. We showed them that we're not afraid. Now we make sure they never forget it. She studied him for a moment, then smiled. You really think one ship can take on the whole Zelthar war machine? Vance met her gaze. I think one ship already did. Solis chuckled, shaking her head as she turned to leave. You're insane, Captain. Vance allowed himself a small smile. So I've been told. As the Perseus drifted through the void, wounded but defiant, Elias Vance knew one thing for certain. The Zelthar expected an army. Instead, they got him. And he wasn't done yet.